to turn it over to Ranking Member Norman for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Cheryl. Secretary Xerix, the substitute amendment to H.R. 2722 appears to contain several provisions that pertain to the administration of elections as opposed to election security. To me, it appears that these election administration provisions are a federal overreach that really encroach upon the function of state and local election administrators and their job. What are your thoughts about the bill? And as an example, it looks like the bill requires paper ballots to be printed on recycled paper produced in the United States. And is that your read of the bill, and what would a mandate like that mean for Oklahoma?
Well, in general, let me say that when I was working with one of my home state senators, and I apologize for mentioning a member from the other body, but Mr. Langford, when he was working on some election security, I told him many of the same things I'm about to tell you, that I do believe that it's important to remember the differences between different states. The recycled paper, for example, I personally, it is in the bill. I did read it there. I'm not exactly sure what the security purpose of that is. I know that with our current voting system, it cannot use recycled paper because of the sensitivity of the scanners. And if we were required to use recycled paper, it would actually run the risk of causing false readings.
Well, do you, in your opinion, do you think the election administration provisions of the bill reach too far into the administration of elections, which really is inherently a function of each state?
In general, I think broad guidelines are better, and leaving specific decisions are better in the hands of the state.
Okay. Mr. Kelly, you briefly discussed VVSG 2.0 and how it is structurally distinct from previous iterations of the VVSGs. Specifically, you indicated that the new structure is aimed at providing high-level principles and guidelines on functions that are incorporated into devices that make up a voting system. From the perspective of state and local election officials, do you think the high-level approach taken by the VVSG 2.0 provide a more workable and implementable set of guidelines when compared to the previous iterations?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. Actually, from the standpoint of security, reliability, usability, and accessibility, I definitely believe that. The principles and guidelines are high level. They are certainly a good roadmap for heading down that path, but they're not in the weeds. They're not the test assertions. They're not the requirements. So as it stands, those principles and guidelines in VVSG 2.0, I think, are light years ahead, sir, of where we were.
Okay. And Secretary Xerix, based on your experience, do you believe that a high-level approach is more workable and implementable, and is this the right approach?
In my opinion, yes. I'm very supportive of the VVSG 2.0 guidelines that are out there. Although I'm not speaking for the National Association of State Election Directors, NASED, I am a member, and I know that they have expressed concerns about a second part of that, where I know the EAC is seeking to vote on the actual testing standards. And you know, my concern there is that with what we've seen in the past, with a lack of a quorum at the EAC, you run the risk then of getting stuck, as we currently are, with out-of-date standards.
Thank you. And Dr. Remind, in layman's terms, can you describe what the election profile to the cybersecurity framework is, how it functions, and how it stands to help state and local election officials fortify their election systems?
Yes, sir. The cybersecurity framework that was spearheaded by NIST and is now being adopted around the world is a high-level document that is applicable and scalable to a wide variety of different sectors of the economy, for example. In order to be maximally useful to a specific sector, and in particular the critical infrastructure sectors that include now the election infrastructure, certain tailoring needs to be done to the cybersecurity framework to make it maximally effective, and that's what we're actually working on right now. So it's essentially making sure that we make decisions that are predicated on the needs of a particular sector.
Great. Thank you so much. Y'all have been very responsive, and thank you for your questions. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. The chair will now recognize herself for 5